Back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, July 30th, 2025, and today we are coming at you with a brand new congressional map out of the state of Texas, going full force into the 2026 midterm elections. If you've been watching for a while, you remember that Texas and the Texas Republican delegation has been calling for a brand new congressional map ahead of what they expect to be a Democratic wave year in the 2026 midterm elections. A lot of conversation surrounding whether or not Texas will be gerrymandered into oblivion for the Democratic Party, and today we have our answer. Now, I have a video coming out later today talking about how Democrats, despite the Texas gerrymander, will likely retain House control, and I want you to understand that that is what I believe and maintain throughout this video. But I actually recorded that yesterday because I wasn't expecting to have time today talking about the Texas map. I didn't expect the Texas map to be released this morning, so I'm now actually here, rushed to my laptop, popped open the screen, got my microphone plugged in, and had to talk about it because a lot of the conclusions that I arrived at yesterday are largely the same. The actual difference here is that the map that I was expecting to be presented with in some time throughout this week or next week, I actually expected to be more in favor of the Republican Party than what we are actually working with. And it's honestly quite fascinating. On your screen right now is the brand new congressional map here, a brand new one that Republicans have put forth that have given them 5 seats across the map here, giving Democrats, an additional hurdle in the 2026 midterm elections. But in terms of what has actually changed from point A to point B, meaning 2024 to 2026, we can actually see visualized here. Texas 9th, Texas 32nd, Texas 35th, Texas 28th, and Texas 34th all see substantive changes from being Democratic districts to Republican districts. But the question now is, to what degree are these districts going to be drawn, and to what degree do Republicans actually win them? When I looked at this map here and the numbers that were released, the map and also the list of congressional districts with incumbents being faced up against each other, you can see they are asking for challenges between Democrats in some of these districts and drawing out some Democrats in areas where they just simply know that it's going to be more difficult for them to win in the future. Looking at the Texas map here, we're working with, yes, a lot more red seats than normal, but not necessarily being entirely unwinnable for the Democratic Party. Allow me to explain. When you take a look at these districts in specific, you have Texas 9th, Texas 32nd, and Texas 35th that are more than likely going to be the districts that move in favor of the Republican Party. They go from Harris plus 20 in Texas 9th to Trump plus 15. Texas 32nd goes from Harris plus 24 to Trump plus 16. Texas 35 goes to Harris plus 34 to Trump plus 10. Those previous Democratic vote sinks that we saw in Texas in the 2024 map have now been turned into cracked districts, building out the Republican Party's vote share. But those seats I do think will go to the Republican Party. They more likely than not will win those 3 seats, seeing 30, 40-point swings in just 2 elections. But what we will see is that there are 2 districts in specific that I am quite interested in, Texas 28 and Texas 34. Now, looking on the map here, you might recognize these districts along the Rio Grande Valley and across southern Texas. Texas 34 went to Gonzales by 2.6%. Texas 28 went to Cuellar by 5.6%. These 2 districts were won by Democrats by narrow margins in the last election. And so the argument for the Republicans are that if they take Cuellar's district, which went from Trump plus 7 to Trump plus 10, Cuellar would lose in the next cycle. And if you take Trump plus 4 in the Texas 34th district and make it Trump plus 10, Gonzales loses in the next election. But it's honestly not as simple as that. When you take a look at the real understanding about what this race is, the map I was expecting to be working with after the redraw was that these districts would be drawn to be entirely more Republican. Not just 3 points more Republican, not just 6 points more Republican, something like what we see in these other districts. The 9th district shifts by 35 points to the right. The 32nd district, 40 points to the right. The 35th district, 44 points to the right. But down in the southern part of Texas, the 28th district and the 34th district, Republicans are actually relying on a lot if they expect to win those districts easily. These districts in specific are ones that Democrats have historically outperformed. In 2024, Gonzales outran Kamala Harris by 7 points in 2024. If this district truly turns to be Trump plus 10, if the national environment shifts by just 3 points to the left, Democrats win this district. When you take a look at Cuellar, who has honestly done quite well in the 28th district for quite some time, if you take a look at this new map here, it doesn't favor Republicans enough that they would be able to beat him. That is the problem with this new map. And although it is a gerrymander and an egregious one at that, and I think that Democrats looking at this are likely going to retaliate and say, we're going to follow up by drawing you out, Republicans being you out of the maps in states like Maryland, more so in Illinois, more so in California. There's going to be some serious battles, legal battles, congressional battles, whatever it is, in 2026 because of this new map that Texas has put forth. But all to say, I honestly have looked at this map and I thought maybe there would be even more, even more twisting of the knife in the side of the Democratic Party in the state of Texas. But I don't know if we're going to get that. Looking at this map, I am less and less convinced the Republican Party knew how to draw this map to the degree that was necessary to draw a map that gave Trump exactly what he wanted. Because a 5-seat pickup might not come. It actually reminds me a bit of what we saw in Ohio. After the 2020 election, the Democrats had just about 4 seats in this state and one competitive seat with Tim Ryan. He ended up deciding to retire and instead run for Senate in 2022. So Republicans were hoping that with a Republican trifecta, they had the governorship, the state house, the state senate, they had everything in this state, that they would draw a map that would be unfavorable for the Democratic Party. And based off 2020 vote share, they were right. But they didn't expect 2022 to be a year that was more in favor of the Democratic Party. And Democrats actually did way better than expected. Again, reminder that Republicans are the ones that had control over this map, and what they did was they drew a map 10-5. By the time you reach 2024, even with Donald Trump's dominance, he did better in Ohio than he did in 2020 by about a few percentage points, Ohio ended up still voting 5 seats for the Democrats. Yes, the 9th district went from being plus 13 down to less than a point, but at the end of the day, the point is the Democratic Party held up in this map. So now Ohio is going to have a new map, and it's likely going to favor the GOP even more. But there are prime examples of times where political parties draw maps that don't end up as favorable. Now, no one can deny that Ohio is a gerrymander. Based on actual vote share, too, Democrats should roughly have the same amount of seats as Republicans, if not 1 or 2 seats less. Certainly not 5 seats less. Certainly not only a third of the Ohio delegation. So the gerrymander largely was successful, but it wasn't successful enough. And I think something similar could happen up with Texas. Again, that video that I'm sending out later today talks about how even with Republicans getting 5 seats in Texas, Democrats are still on the pathway to win back the House majority. But making it so Democrats could actually win 2 of these seats means that Democrats might only be reduced down to 11 seats in Texas rather than 8. And that's a big difference. The Republican Party is counting on Texas to follow through because it is one of the final states that could truly redraw the map. Florida might consider it, but even then, Democrats are already at less than a third of the seats across the state. Texas is a state that nearly rivals California in terms of population and had the ability to draw a map. But Democrats obviously are still very outraged. They're still very angry. But what I want to also remind us too is that some of these Trump-drawn maps aren't going to be super favorable in every degree, right? Taking a look at Texas 35, Donald Trump winning the district by 10 points sure means something. But it doesn't mean that it is entirely out of reach. After all, it's the same characterization as Texas 28 and Texas 34. All of these districts were drawn to be in a way that was Trump plus 10 or more. But what I will remind you of is that in the 2018 midterms, yes, I used the Control F feature to find Trump's name because it shows you very quickly, districts like New York House 11 voted for Trump by 9, then went to the Democrats by 2. Oklahoma's 5th district went to Trump by 13. Democrats ended up winning it in 2018. Donald Trump won in another district here in New York in the 22nd district by 16 points, and Democrats pulled ahead. So looking at a lot of these districts here, and also too, I think the one that we remember heavily if you focused on Conor Lamb in 2018, this was a Trump plus 20 district that Democrats ended up winning. So when I see the map here being Trump plus 15, Trump plus 16, Trump plus 10, it's obviously banking on a lot, and it's a lot more difficult when your district is a Democratic vote sink to now a Republican advantage district 1,000%. But to the degree that it is entirely unwinnable, I don't buy it. I do think that Democrats will more likely than not lose the 9th, 32nd, and 35th. The types of Democrats, Gonzalez and Cuellar, are perfect for their district and were drawn in competitive districts in the first place and have the infrastructure to run a competitive race. The other 3, not as much. But going back to the point here, what we find is that I still think Democrats have an outsized chance of winning in the 28th, in the 34th, and maybe the 35th, and potentially, if the wave is blue enough, in 2026. The 9th and the 32nd aren't entirely out of play. If anything, they put the Republican Party to invest in these districts that, in theory, based on Trump's ask, should have been immediately red flips. That is what is interesting, and that is what I think will define the 2026 elections if this map does not work and follow through. I talked about a dummy mander when we came into this map, and I don't think this map qualifies exactly as a dummy mander, but it has qualities that would invite you to call it that if 2026 ends up going in the way that Democrats would hope in a state like Texas. And what that essentially means is that if these 5 seats end up being less Republican than they were supposed to be, and Democrats even win 1 or 2 of these seats, the ultimate goal of this special session would have failed. Because what it was supposed to do was give Democrats an impossibility in the map here, an impossibility in these districts. And that's not what has been provided. And that's why it could be difficult here. Like written here, Brad Johnson, senior reporter over at the Texan, says Republicans are betting on a lot, replicating 2024 to get all 5 of these seats. Because yes, all 5 of these districts are Trump districts. But what we know about midterms, especially midterms under Trump, it doesn't matter how much Trump won the district by. Democrats still have a fighting chance in a lot of Trump districts. They flipped a lot of them in 2018 and arguably could do well in 2026. And that, I think, will be the defining moment here about what this map actually goes through on. So let's keep our eyes peeled. The Texas map seems like it's going to pass with flying colors through the Texas state legislature, but in terms of actual implementation and Democratic Party investment, don't expect them to give up too easily, because these numbers here aren't as egregious as Republicans could have gone for. It isn't to say that it isn't entirely egregious. Absolutely, right? Any type of gerrymandering is wrong. But looking at where this is, I imagine Democrats will fight fire with fire. I imagine the Republican Party will not get the exact outcome they were hoping in this map, and going through all the shenanigans that might end up with Republicans doing worse in 2026 instead of better could be tremendously more dangerous for the GOP. That sometimes going for too much in a state that already had arguably the perfect, most untouchable gerrymander. You're not finding it today, and even with this new map, Republicans will make gains. But to the degree that they were expecting to, I don't think that will be the reality. And to the degree that it saves them in the midterms, no shot in hell. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the top left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join on the screen. There's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.